I'm recording this in a Glywys Llanelian church. There's been a church on and around this site for well over a millennium. Behind me is a medieval rood screen with a skeletal figure on it. You can just see its bottom half. It's a reminder of the fragility and mortality of humankind. Faith has shaped these parts, not always Christians, but for well over a millennium, followers of Jesus Christ have gathered here to worship in this most northerly part of Wales. Well, now, on Sunday the 22nd of November, I conducted the last act of public worship in two of my churches. And on the 6th of December, I will do so the same in another two. I have many great, good, and even eccentric predecessors. In those particular contexts, I will have no successor. On a winter's morning in St Mary's Church in Llanacymedd, I can see my breath as I celebrate communion with three people, as my fingers turn a bluish tinge on the chalice. I would never ever invite a young family to this. I think silently, as my three companions sing a song that no one in the community now remembers. On Christmas morning in Amlwch, a town of 3,500 people, no one comes to church, and I sit alone. Church attendance in these parts has been dwindling for years. I lead 10 congregations, 6 now, with the largest being 20 souls and the smallest sometimes just being one other apart from myself. True enough, there are new forms of worship growing. Messy Church has taken off like a rocket. Children, families, young adults come together to do craft, to eat. Hospitality has always been cool for Christians and for people of other faiths and none as well. And I'm welcomed into all parts of the community. The facts, though, are incontrovertible, even for a priest or to an ethnographer like me. More people come into my church buildings for projects than to worship. If my primary role is to do the latter, then I need to take a long, hard look at myself and the institution that I serve. Perhaps it's dying. I wonder what that means for people of a faith who believe in life beyond death. On Easter Sunday this year, of course, in common with Christians the world over, I didn't go physically into a church building. The churches and the chapels in UK and throughout Europe were closed. I'm a priest in the church in Wales. It's an autonomous part of the Anglican Communion. In American terms, it is Episcopalian. My formative years and my young life were shaped by church or chapel going. And yet, for that brief moment in time, everything stopped. Everything stopped. Do you feel redundant? I am asked as I walk past a residential care home by a member of staff. I'm annoyed. I'm even a little incensed by the question. I've not been inactive. I've taken funerals. I've comforted the bereaved. I've ensured the faithful are taught the Bible. I've produced prayer booklets, Bible studies, as well as pausing a physical distance to pray for people when they ask me to. I've become fully conversant with Zoom, Facebook, Twitter, and my youngest nephew has recently introduced me to TikTok. I've learned to do things differently. But for my questioner, though, even if it is no more than a passing comment on a summer's day, I've not been seen. I've not been allowed in the places where I would usually go. The visible public square has been closed. Actually, the public square has just moved elsewhere, and there's no room, perhaps, for the church or for an eccentric vicar like myself. When are you reopening, I'm asked? Will we reopen is the question I want to respond with, but I dare not ask. In all my churches, much of the demographic is elderly, with many of those who join me falling into a vulnerable category by virtue of age or health concerns. What if we don't reopen, I wonder? As the question is posed, a kaleidoscope of thoughts clamour for my attention. What would I do and who would I be and what would I become? Ministry as a priest has shaped my last 20 years. If we did not reopen, is a question that brings me out in a cold sweat. Many of those who worship with me do so out of habit. I've been told time and time again that they're not coming back because they're not religious, vicar. In fact, as someone else has rightly observed, many members of my congregation are functionally atheist. That's true the world over. Faithful by culture and habit. Not that I blame them. Would I come to a cold building with songs that no one knows, chanting creeds that do not resonate as closely as they did? In the vestry of one of my churches, there's a long list of clergy who have served, dating back several hundred years. I, Kevin Ellis, am in danger of being the last person on that list. I, Kevin Ellis, could be the last priest in this area. But what are the costs of keeping this going? What are the costs, I would say, for me personally? True, the buildings bear eloquent witness. And I wish I could take you around this building and another building which has a fine example of Flemish glass with stained glass windows that depict the story of Jesus Christ. They're beautiful and moving. And yet, in an institution that no longer seems to be relevant, how do we let it die? Do we let it die so that new may come? That, I believe, is always the case. It's always the case that the church or faith or spirituality will be needed, but maybe not in its formal time. As I record this piece, the skeletal picture becomes closer into view. There he is. Do I believe in life beyond death? Am I a believer in the resurrection? Or am I, as I have described those who worship with me, in reality, functionally atheist? I don't think I am. But should I be satisfied with just being part of the community? Brilliant though that is, my best project was allowing 40 people to come into one of my churches 2 years ago to knit together 40,000 poppies to commemorate the end of the Great War. They were brilliant. I enjoyed it. And is that my purpose? To knit people together, and in knitting people together, does the institution have to die? Will there be life beyond death?